The last Thursday in May brought an unusual heat wave to Youngstown. The air in the post office seemed thick and still, the fans only stirring the stifling atmosphere. My fingers, damaged by 30 years of working in a steel mill, quickly sorted through envelopes, blue, white, brown, stamped and unstamped. Letters to the locals, bills, advertising brochures. Most people now communicated via the internet, but paper letters still arrived, stubborn heralds of a bygone era, like myself. My name is Merritt Thatcher. I'm 55, and I've been working at the Youngstown Post Office for 7 years, ever since our steel mite plant closed. The town was gradually becoming a ghost, with young people leaving and those who stayed often falling into the net of addiction and poverty. The once proud industrial center has become a decaying symbol of American deindustrialization. Merritt, you look like you're in a dream today, Doreen called out to me from the next table. Have you checked the mail for Maynard Street yet? I nodded, not looking up from sorting. Doreen had been working here twice as long as I had and knew every single person in town by name. These were her best and worst years at the same time. My eyes rested on an unusual blue envelope with the Steel Mite logo in the upper corner. My fingers froze. Who would think of sending something with this logo now? The plant had closed. Its equipment had long been sold for scrap, and the premises had turned into a shelter for the homeless and drug addicts. The envelope was addressed to me. Putting aside the rest of the mail, I carefully opened it. Dear Merritt Thatcher, we invite you to the 30th anniversary of the founding of the Steel Mite Metallurgical Plant. The meeting will take place on Saturday, June 15th at 4 o'clock in the Youngstown Community Center. I smiled. The 30th anniversary, even though the plant hadn't even made it to 25. I wonder who organizes such meetings. Probably one of the former managers who had enough money for a quiet retirement. This letter stirred up memories that I had been trying to suppress. The plant was our whole life. It was where I met Willard, my son's father. It was where I earned my living until Willard decided that a family was too much of a burden for a creative soul like him and left to try his luck in Nashville when Garland was 5. You look good today, Merritt. Doreen winked as she passed me. You look 10 years younger. Thanks. I quickly tucked the invitation into my bag. It's just the nice weather. Yeah, it's hot and muggy, perfect for a 50-year-old woman with arthritis. Who would have thought? We both laughed. Doreen, unlike me, was able to find humor in the most mundane situations. The rest of the day, I couldn't stop thinking about the invitation. It was not just a meeting of former colleagues. It was a reminder of everything I had lost, of my youth, hopes, dreams, about how I had planned to save money for Garland's college education so that he could escape from this town. But the plant closed, the economy collapsed, and instead of college, Garland went to work in construction, married Lavinia, and now they were raising my grandson Ted together. At 7 o'clock, I left the post office and headed for the bus stop. My old Honda had been in the garage for 2 weeks, waiting for parts I could afford. The bus was almost empty, just an elderly couple in the front and a teenager with headphones in the back. Leaning against the window, I looked out at the familiar streets of Youngstown. Cracked sidewalks, abandoned houses with plywood-boarded windows, graffiti on the walls of abandoned shops, and in some places there are islands of recovery. A new cafeteria on the corner of Pine Street, the renovated facade of the old library. Small signs that the city was clinging to life despite everything. When the bus stopped at the intersection of Maple and Oak, I saw a familiar figure. My grandson Ted was sitting on a bench near the bus stop, scribbling in his sketchbook. His blonde hair was blowing in the wind, and his face was focused. He didn't notice me until I got off the bus. "Grandma!" he exclaimed, running up with a big smile. "I knew you'd be passing through here." My heart was full of joy. Ted was my ray of sunshine. At 9 years old, he had an amazingly keen perception of the world and the people around him. Hi, baby. I hugged him, feeling the warmth spread through my body. What are you doing here alone? Mom's working late and Dad. He stumbled. Dad didn't come home again last night. I told Mom I was going to Jacob's, but I really wanted to see you. I hugged him tighter. Lavinia, my sister-in-law, is not likely to be happy to know that Ted lied to her to meet me. Let's go to my place, I suggested. I'll make you dinner and then we'll call your mom. We walked and Ted talked excitedly about his new astronomy project at school. Miss Woodworth said my project on black holes was the best in the class. He jumped up and down, waving his arms. I showed how they form and why light can't escape from them. That's great, Teddy. I felt a surge of pride. You're a really smart boy. Dad said it was a waste of time, Ted suddenly said, his voice quiet. Something stabbed me in the chest. Garland was repeating the same words I had heard my father say so often, a cycle that seemed impossible to break. Your dad is wrong, I said firmly. An education is the most important thing you can get, and we will find a way to pay for college when the time comes. I promise. My house, a small one-story structure on the outskirts of town, looked modest but cozy. I bought it with the money I received as compensation after the factory closed. The small garden in front was my pride, with roses that I had planted in the first year after moving in. Ted immediately ran to the refrigerator, knowing that his favorite apple juice and chocolate bars were always there. Grandma, did you get my letter? He asked, opening the juice. I sent it 3 days ago. A letter? I was surprised. No, I haven't seen it yet. I sent you an invitation to our school concert, Ted explained, sighing in disappointment. I'm playing the flute. I'll be there, darling. Really? His eyes sparkled. Mom said you'll probably be too busy. Typical Lavinia, always trying to control my contact with my grandson. I'm never too busy for you, I assured him as I pulled out the dinner ingredients from the fridge. While I was preparing macaroni and cheese, Ted's favorite meal, he was sitting at the kitchen table drawing. What are you drawing? I asked as I stirred the sauce. Us, he replied simply. You, Mom, Dad, and I. Only everyone is happy, and no one is fighting. His words made me stop. Children are so sensitive to the tension in adult relationships, even when we try to hide it. Did they fire Dad again? I asked cautiously, not turning around. There was silence, and I knew I had hit the nail on the head. Garland has always had trouble keeping a job. He had changed at least 8 jobs in the last 5 years. There were always reasons. His boss was unfair, his coworkers were jealous, or the work was too tiring. He said it's only temporary. Ted finally said, My mom was screaming a lot yesterday. She said she couldn't live like this anymore. I sighed, trying to keep my real thoughts at bay. Lavinia, despite all her flaws, was right. Garland was not a reliable support for the family, but he was still my son, and I couldn't afford to criticize him in front of my own child. Adults fight sometimes, but that doesn't mean they don't love each other, I said carefully. Mom said he was sick, Ted suddenly blurted out, that he needed help, but he didn't want to take it. She was crying in the bathroom, thinking I couldn't hear. My heart clenched. What did sick mean? Does Garland have some kind of health problem that I don't know about? Your dad. I paused, searching for words. He's going through a rough patch. But he'll get better. You'll see. Ted nodded, but his expression showed that he didn't believe me. Children often understand more than we think. We had dinner, and I called Lavinia to tell her that I had Ted. She sounded tired and irritated. He lied to me again. That's great. He just wanted to see his grandmother. I tried to soften the situation. I can take him home after dinner. No, she cut me off. I'll pick him up at 9. And, Merritt, Don't fill his head with these silly dreams of college and academia. We need to prepare him for the real world. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. Every child deserves to dream, Lavinia. Dreams don't pay the bills, she replied dryly. I'll see you at 9. After the call, I felt the familiar fatigue that always came after talking to my daughter-in-law. Lavinia came to our family 10 years ago, when Garland had just started working at a construction site. She was an ambitious young woman from a middle-class family who saw my son as a promising man with working skills. But life turned out to be more difficult than she expected. Ted's birth, financial difficulties, Garland's problems with work. All of this gradually turned her into the tough, frustrated woman I knew now. Ted helped me wash the dishes, and then we sat down in the living room to watch his favorite science series about space exploration. He leaned against me, the warmth of his small body soothing. At moments like that, I felt like I still had something to fight for. The sound of a car pulling up outside the house interrupted our cozy evening. Lavinia had arrived early. "Ted, get your things," I called out, not hiding my disappointment. The boy reluctantly reached for his backpack and album. "Can I come again tomorrow?" he asked, his eyes hopeful. "Ask your mom first," I replied, knowing that Lavinia would most likely refuse. When I opened the door, I did not expect to see my son. Garland stood next to Lavinia, looking tired and worn out. His once bright blue eyes now seemed dull, and the dark circles beneath them testified to sleepless nights. "Mom," he nodded, not looking me in the eye. "Garland?" I tried to hide my surprise. Dad. Ted ran out into the hallway, but stopped when he noticed the tension between the adults. "Hey, champ!" Garland tried to smile, but it was strained. Lavinia stood silently, her arms crossed over her chest, her gaze cold and judgmental. She always looked at my house as if she were calculating its value and finding it insufficient. "Thank you for looking after it," she said formally. "But next time, please call me as soon as you have it." "Of course," I nodded, feeling my whole body tense. The boy went back into the living room to get his things, leaving the three of us in an awkward silence. "How's work going, Garland?" I asked, trying to break the tension. My son shifted from one foot to the other in embarrassment, and Lavinia exhaled sharply. "He no longer works at Garland Construction," she said, anticipating her husband's response. "There was a disagreement with the management." "It's temporary," Garland added quickly. "I have a couple of promising options. I'm meeting with the guys from the Pioneer Building tomorrow." I knew that song all too well. Promising options that never materialized, meetings that didn't lead to employment, promises that went unfulfilled. Ted returned with his jacket and backpack, ready to leave. "Remember what I said about the stars," I whispered in his ear. "They're always there, even if we can't see them behind the clouds." He squeezed me tighter than usual, as if he didn't want to let go. "I love you, Grandma." "I love you too, baby." As I watched them get into the car, Lavinia driving, Garland in the passenger seat, Ted in the back, I felt a familiar ache in my heart. My family, but at the same time such strangers. How did we get to this point? When I returned to the living room, I noticed that Ted had forgotten his drawing. It was a picture of our family, me, Garland, Lavinia, and Ted, holding hands under a starry sky. On the back, in a child's handwriting, was written, "My family. One day we will all be happy together." Tears filled my eyes. I walked over to the table where there was an invitation to a meeting of former employees of the plant. Perhaps this was a chance to go back in time, to remember who I am and where I came from. Maybe it would help me find strength for the future, a future where Ted could achieve more than his father and grandmother. I took a pen and wrote on the back of the invitation, "I will be present." The meeting of former employees of the plant was noisy and nostalgic. Old faces, faded memories, and new wrinkles all gave me mixed feelings. I saw Dixie Reeves, who used to work with me on the assembly line, Sean Pringle, who was our shift supervisor, and many others. Some had changed beyond recognition. Some looked as if time had not touched them. We reminisced, laughed, and sometimes were silent when the memories became too painful. After the meeting, I felt strangely relieved, as if I had closed a chapter in my life. I returned home and decided to call Garland. We rarely talked for no reason at all. But his phone was off, and that made me feel uneasy. Even when we didn't get along, Garland was always in touch. The week after the meeting passed by routinely, sorting emails, dinners alone, crossword puzzles in front of the TV. I tried several times to contact my son, but to no avail. Lavinia didn't pick up the phone, and Ted must have been under strict control because he didn't show up either. On Wednesday, I went to a school concert where Ted played the flute, and he was great. However, neither Garland nor Lavinia was there, and that made me very worried. After the performance, I approached my grandson, who looked disappointed that his parents were not there, but tried not to show it. "You were amazing, Teddy." I hugged him, feeling his little body tremble. "Thanks for coming, Grandma." His voice was quiet. "Mom said they couldn't make it because Dad isn't feeling well." "What's wrong with him?" I asked, trying to hide my anxiety. Ted shrugged, but his eyes avoided mine. I don't know. He sleeps a lot and hardly ever leaves his bedroom. Mom says it's just job hunting fatigue." Something in his tone told me that he didn't believe that explanation, and I didn't believe it either. Garland had had problems with work before, but it had never turned him into a recluse. That evening, I tried to call their house again, but no one answered. 2 days after the concert, on a Friday, my phone rang at 5 in the morning. I woke up instantly, as it only happens when you subconsciously expect bad news. "Hello?" My voice was hoarse from sleep. "Merritt, it's Lavinia." Her tone was tense, as if she was holding back a powerful emotion. Fear, anger, I couldn't tell. "Lavinia, what's wrong? It's 5 in the morning." "Garland is in the hospital." She cut me off. "The doctors say, they say he needs a transplant." My mind refused to accept her words. Kidney failure? My son? He's only 35. But how? When did it happen? I had already gotten out of bed, nervously searching for my clothes in the semi-dark room. "It progressed gradually," she answered with some strange restraint in her voice. "He had been feeling bad for the past few months, but we thought it was just stress. Yesterday he got worse, so I called an ambulance. I'll be right there." My voice was trembling. "Which hospital?" "Central, the nephrology department." Lavinia was silent, and then added more quietly, "Merritt, the doctors said the best thing is a related donor." I froze in the middle of the room, holding my sweater in my hands. "A related donor?" "Yes, Merritt. You're his mother. You need to be tested for compatibility. Otherwise, otherwise, we'll have to wait on a kidney donor list, and that could take years. Years that Garland may not have." The room suddenly began to spin before my eyes. I sat down on the edge of the bed, trying to cope with the dizziness. "Give a kidney?" "Of course, I'll do all the necessary tests," I said when I was finally able to speak. "Then come as soon as possible," Lavinia said sharply. She hung up the phone, and I was left sitting in the silence of my bedroom, trying to process what I had heard. My son, my Garland, my child was dying. I called a taxi because my hands were shaking too much to drive myself. On the way to the hospital, I tried to remember the last time I saw my son healthy and happy. Perhaps on Ted's birthday, when Garland managed to find a good job building a new shopping center. But even then, he looked tired, often rubbing his lower back and complaining of headaches. Youngstown Central Hospital was a large concrete building from the 80s that had long been in need of repair. The nephrology department had a heavy smell of antiseptics mixed with something depressing that is always present in places where people are fighting for their lives. Lavinia was sitting in the corridor, staring at the wall in front of her. Her usually immaculately styled hair was disheveled, and dark circles were visible under her eyes. It took her a while to notice me, and I could see an expression on her face that I had rarely seen before: real, unconcealed fatigue and fear. Lavinia, I approached her, and she jerked awake, as if she had woken up. Finally, she stood up, but made no move to hug me or shake my hand. "The doctor is waiting for you. I want to see Garland first," I said firmly. Lavinia pressed her lips together as if to object, but then nodded. Room 215, but he's not in the best condition. I walked down the corridor, feeling my legs give out. What would I see behind the door? How bad is his condition? I stopped in front of the ward, took a deep breath, and opened the door. Garland was lying on a hospital bed, surrounded by tubes and monitors. His face, once so similar to his father's, was now puffy and pale, with a yellowish tint. His eyes were closed, and only the steady rise and fall of his chest indicated that he was alive. "Oh my God, Garland," I whispered as I came closer. His eyes slowly opened. When he saw me, a faint smile flashed across his face. "Mom," his voice was barely audible. "You came." "Of course I came." I took his hand, cold and powerless, like a man whose kidneys refused to work. He tried to joke, but coughed. "Why didn't you say anything?" I tried to make it sound like concern rather than reproach. Garland turned his gaze to the window, where a new day was beginning. "I thought I could handle it, that it was just a temporary problem. The doctors, they talked about lifestyle changes, medications, diet. I tried, I really did." I squeezed his hand tighter. "My child." Even now, at 55, I could see in him the little boy I used to soothe after bad dreams. "We'll find a way," I said, with a confidence I didn't really feel. Lavinia said there was a possibility of a transplant. "They've put me on a kidney donor list." Garland nodded. "But that could take years, and I probably don't have that long." "I'll take the compatibility tests," I said firmly. "If we're a match, you'll get my kidney." "Mom, you don't have to." "I'm your mother, Garland." "Of course I have to." Suddenly, the door opened and a man in a white coat entered the room, tall, with a penetrating gaze and graying temples. "I'm Dr. Wales. I'm glad you came so quickly." Lavinia followed him into the room, her face now wearing a strangely determined expression. "Merritt is ready for the compatibility tests," she said, not giving me a chance to answer. Dr. Wales nodded, but he didn't seem as urgent as Lavinia. "Of course, we can arrange for the tests to begin today. But first, I'd like to explain all the risks and procedures so that you understand what you're getting into." "Risks?" I felt something cold slide down my back. The doctor walked over to Garland's bedside, checking the monitors as he spoke. "Kidney donation is a major surgery. You'll have to spend about a week in the hospital, followed by 4 to 6 weeks of recovery. There are also risks associated with anesthesia, the possibility of infection, bleeding. We've already discussed this with Dr. Garland," Lavinia interrupted, coming closer. "If Merritt is a match for a donor, we need to act quickly." I stared at her, feeling my inner resistance to her commanding tone grow. But then I turned my gaze to Garland, who was lying there, so pale and powerless, and my protest faded. He was my son. I brought him into this world. I had given him life once, and I could do it again. "I understand the risks," I told Dr. Wales, "and I'm ready." The doctor looked at me carefully, trying to assess whether I was fully aware of my decision. I will organize all the necessary tests. But first, we need to draw blood to determine your blood type and tissue compatibility. The next hours turned into an endless series of medical procedures: blood tests, urine tests, electrocardiogram, x ray, kidney ultrasound. I moved from one room to another, feeling not like a person, but like a set of organs that needed to be checked. Lavinia stayed with Garland, and I was ashamed to admit that I was relieved to have her gone. Something about her behavior bothered me: too insistent, too determined. Of course, she was worried about her husband, but I saw something else in her eyes that I couldn't understand. Later that day, while I was sitting in the hallway waiting for the results, Ted arrived at the hospital. He was brought by Lavinia's mother, an elderly woman who always looked at me with barely concealed contempt. She greeted me briefly and went off to find her daughter, leaving Ted with me. "Grandma," he rushed to me, hugging me with unexpected strength. "You're here." "Of course I'm here, honey." I hugged him, breathing in the familiar smell of his shampoo. "Dad's really sick, isn't he?" "Yes, your dad is sick right now." I tried to speak calmly, although my heart was pounding with pain. Ted nodded, as if that was exactly what he was expecting to hear. "Mom said you could give your kidney to Dad. It's possible, if we're a good match. The doctors are looking into it now." Ted's eyes suddenly filled with tears. "Grandma, I don't want you to get hurt. Is it, is it dangerous?" I hugged him tighter, feeling my heart break with his concern. In this crazy world, with my adult daughter-in-law pressuring me and my son lying in a hospital bed, this little boy was worried about me. "It's going to be okay, Teddy. This operation is safe for the donor. I'll be fine, and your dad will be fine too." He looked at me with an expression that seemed far too serious for a 9-year-old. "Promise? I promise." But something in his eyes told me that he didn't fully believe it. "Ted," Lavinia's sharp voice came from the hallway. "I've been looking for you everywhere. Come here." The boy flinched and reluctantly let go of my hand. "I have to go, Grandma." "Of course, dear." "Your mom is worried." When Ted approached Lavinia, she said something quietly to him, and he nodded and walked in the direction of Garland's room. Lavinia walked toward me, her heels clacking hard on the linoleum. "Any results?" she asked without preamble. "Not yet," I replied, trying to remain calm. "Dr. Wales said some tests take time." Lavinia sat down next to me, showing signs of fatigue for the first time all day. "It's all so unfair," she said quietly, looking straight ahead. "He's young. We have a child. How could this happen?" I did not answer. There was something real and sincere in her voice, a rarity in our conversation. "The doctors say his condition is deteriorating faster than they expected," she continued. "If we don't find a donor, if you're not a match—" "I am," I said with a confidence I didn't feel. "We should be compatible." Lavinia looked at me, and for a moment I saw gratitude in her eyes. But quickly she put her usual mask back on. "It's your duty, Merritt. You are his mother." Her words hit me like a slap in the face. Not a choice, not an act of love or self-sacrifice. "I'm not doing this out of duty, Lavinia. I'm doing this because I love my son." She snorted as if my answer was nonsense and stood up. "I'm going to check on Garland. Let me know when you have the results." I was left alone, feeling a growing heaviness in my chest. It was 6 in the evening, and I had spent most of the day in the hospital, eating nothing but a sandwich from the vending machine. Fatigue was rolling in, and I closed my eyes, trying to find some peace in the midst of the chaos. I opened my eyes and saw Dr. Wales standing in front of me. He was holding a clipboard with papers and had a serious look on his face. "We have preliminary results." He sat down next to me. "You are a suitable donor. Blood type, tissue compatibility, Everything is perfect. It's as if you were twins, not mother and son. I should have been relieved, but instead I felt something heavy falling on my shoulders. What happens now? We need to run a few more tests to make sure your kidneys are completely healthy. After that, we can plan the surgery. Given Garland's condition, the sooner the better. Maybe as soon as next week. Next week. So soon. I nodded, not trusting my voice. But Mrs. Thatcher, Dr. Wales looked me straight in the eye. I want you to know that this is your decision. If at any time you change your mind, just say so. No one has the right to force you to do this. Did he see my doubt? Did he notice the tension between me and Lavinia? Thank you, doctor, but I won't change my mind. This is my son. He nodded, put his hand on my shoulder, and stood up. Go home and get some rest. Tomorrow we will conduct the last tests. I thanked him and gave him a look. I needed to tell Lavinia about the results, but some part of me wanted to delay the moment. I knew her reaction would be complicated. I stood up, feeling my legs ache after waiting all day, and headed for Garland's room. As I walked past the waiting area, I noticed Ted sitting alone, drawing something in his sketchbook. Ted, what are you doing here by yourself? I asked, sitting down with him. Mom went to talk to the doctors, he replied, not looking up from his drawing. Grandma? I heard her on the phone. Something in his voice made me wary. Who was she talking to? I don't know, but she was saying that Dad would get your kidney and that it would solve all their problems. My heart skipped a beat. Solve their problems? What did she mean by that? Ted shrugged, but his eyes, when he finally looked at me, were full of concern. But she seemed happy, not sad like she should be when her dad is sick. Happy. And she said something about insurance. I felt a chill run down my spine. Insurance? What does insurance have to do with Garland's kidney failure? I'm sure Mom was just discussing the details of the treatment. I tried to reassure Ted, even though I didn't believe what I was saying. Ted looked down at the picture. She also said that we were finally lucky, that we had a chance to start a new life. I didn't know what to say. The child had clearly heard something that bothered her, but I couldn't figure out what it was. Merritt! I turned around and saw Lavinia walking quickly toward us. Her face was tense, but when she spotted Ted, her expression softened. Oh, you're here with Grandma, she said, almost gently. It's late. We'll be going home soon. I have news, I said, standing up. Dr. Wales says I'm a match. A perfect match. A strange emotion flashed across Lavinia's face, relief mixed with triumph. That's great. She tried to hold back her reaction, but I could see her eyes change. When's the surgery? Probably next week. That's great, she repeated, and this time she couldn't hide her pleasure. You know, Merritt, I always knew you would make the right choice. It's your duty as a mother. There's that word again, duty. As if I was obligated to give away a part of my body without asking questions. I'm doing this for Garland, I said clearly. Lavinia smiled, but it didn't touch her eyes. Of course. For Garland, it's important. She turned to Ted. Get ready, we're leaving. Grandma Ellen is waiting in the car. Ted reluctantly closed the album and stood up, but before he left, he hugged me tightly. I love you, Grandma, he whispered in my ear. I love you too, baby, I replied, feeling something tighten in my chest. When they left, I was left standing in the middle of the corridor, feeling strangely empty. I should have been happy. I could have saved my son's life. But instead, I felt an uneasiness I couldn't explain. Suddenly, I remembered a strange phrase Ted had said, "We're finally lucky." What could it mean? I decided to stop by Garland's house to say goodbye before I went home. He was already asleep when I entered the room. His face seemed younger in his sleep, more vulnerable, reminding me of the boy I had known before. I quietly approached the bed and gently took his hand. "Everything will be fine, son," I whispered. As I was leaving the room, my eyes stopped on the bedside table. There was a printout from the laboratory, the results of some kind of analysis. The top line of the document caught my eye. Toxicological screening. I was not supposed to read it. It was private, medical. But something made me come closer and look at the paper, and what I saw made me freeze in my tracks. The document clearly showed positive results for opiates and benzodiazepines. My son was not just sick. He was a drug addict, and suddenly, Ted's words, Lavinia's strange behavior, her joyful voice on the phone, all of this began to form a clear, terrifying picture. The toxicology report that I happened to see changed everything. I spent the night without sleep, going over the signs in my head that I should have seen earlier. Garland's sudden mood swings, his constant problems at work, the times he disappeared for days at a time, even his financial difficulties, all of these pointed to a problem that I refused to recognize. The next morning, I returned to the hospital for more tests. I had planned to talk to Dr. Wales alone, to tell him about the toxicology report, but Lavinia would not leave me alone for a moment. She followed me everywhere, as if she was afraid I might run away or change my mind. "The doctors say everything is going great," she said as we sat in the hallway waiting for the results of the latest tests, only 4 days away. I nodded, pretending to be calm, even though my insides were boiling with questions and doubts. "How is Garland feeling today?" "Better," she answered quickly. "Dialysis is helping, but it's only a temporary solution. The doctors say that without a transplant—" Her voice trembled, and for a moment I saw real worry in her. "Lavinia," I began carefully, "do the doctors know Garland's entire medical history? All the factors?" She tensed, her eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" "I think you do." We looked at each other, and at that moment there was complete understanding between us. She knew that I suspected something. "Doctors know everything they need to know," she finally said, standing up. "Excuse me, I need to call my work." She quickly left, leaving me alone with my thoughts. The next 3 days before the surgery passed in a blur. I tried to find a moment to talk to Dr. Wales privately, but Lavinia always seemed to be around. And when she wasn't, Garland was in such a miserable state that I couldn't bring myself to question him. I watched him, looking for the signs of drug addiction that I had read about late at night on the internet. Constricted pupils, occasional drowsiness, a changed voice. But he was so sick from kidney failure that it was impossible to distinguish these signs. Ted came to the hospital every day after school, but Lavinia rarely left him alone with me. She became a shadow that was always between us. And yet, I noticed the anxious look in my grandson's eyes, his tense face when he looked at his parents. On Tuesday, the day before the surgery, I signed all the necessary documents. My hands were shaking as I signed, but I convinced myself that I was making the right choice. No matter what had caused Garland's kidney failure, he was my son, and I couldn't let him die. "You did well, Mrs. Thatcher," Dr. Wales said as he took the paperwork away. "You need to be in the hospital at 8 in the morning tomorrow. Do not eat or drink anything after midnight." I nodded, feeling my throat go dry. "Doctor, can I see you for a minute?" "In private?" Lavinia, who was sitting next to me, tensed. "Is something wrong, Merritt?" Her voice was sweet, but her eyes remained cold. "No, just a few questions about tomorrow." I tried to sound casual. "I want to hear it too," she insisted. "After all, it concerns my husband's health." Dr. Wales looked between us, sensing the tension. "Mrs. Thatcher is entitled to privacy about her own health," he said gently. "But I assure you that if there is anything concerning Mr. Thatcher's condition, I will let you know immediately." Lavinia reluctantly stood up, giving me a suspicious look. Good. I'll be outside Garland's room. As she left, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Doctor, I began quietly, I happened to see Garland's toxicology screening results. There were opiates and other substances. Wales sighed and sat down next to me. I suspected you knew something. Medical ethics restrict what I can reveal about your son's condition, but since you already know, yes, he had traces of several drugs in his system. Is that, is that what caused his kidney failure? The doctor was silent, as if weighing how much he could say. Long-term use of certain painkillers and other drugs can seriously damage the kidneys, especially in combination with alcohol. In your son's case, yes, that's a likely cause. I covered my face with my hands, feeling tears welling up in my eyes. And you're still going to do the transplant? Even knowing that he may continue to use. Mrs. Thatcher, Dr. Wales spoke quietly but firmly. Before a transplant, patients sign an agreement to abstain from harmful substances. This is standard practice, and we will closely monitor his condition after the operation. But what if he breaks this agreement? Then the kidney may fail, the doctor answered bluntly. And I must tell you that the chances of getting another donor kidney in this case will be minimal. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. And Lavinia, does she know about this? His wife was present when we discussed all aspects of Mr. Thatcher's condition. The doctor confirmed. It confirmed my worst suspicions. Lavinia knew about Garland's addiction, but she hid it from me by manipulating my maternal love. Mrs. Thatcher, Dr. Wales continued gently, if you have changed your mind about donating, it is completely understandable. No doctor would condemn you for it. I looked at him, feeling an internal struggle. I I don't know. I need time to think about it. Of course, but I need to know your final decision by morning. I nodded and stood up, feeling tired and drained. I wanted to talk to Garland, to see his eyes when he told me the truth. But when I got to his room, he was sleeping, and Lavinia was sitting next to him as if guarding him. Are you okay? She asked, looking at my face carefully. Yeah, I'm just nervous about tomorrow, I lied. Don't be. Her voice was unnaturally calm. Everything will be fine. You're making the right choice. I looked at her, trying to understand what was going on in her head. Did she really care about Garland? Or did she just want him to survive, no matter the cost? Lavinia, I began carefully, how long has Garland been sick? What do you mean? She tensed, her eyes sharp. We looked at each other over my sleeping son's bed, and I could see her mind working, assessing how much I knew and how it might affect her plans. He's had health problems for a few years now, she finally said evasively, but he'll be fine after the transplant. I hope so, I replied, realizing that I couldn't get the truth out of her right now. That night I did not sleep again. I thought about Garland, about his addiction, about how he got to this point. I remembered his childhood, his dreams, his disappointments. I remembered how he first hurt his back on a construction site, how he complained of constant pain. Was that when it all started? With prescription painkillers that gradually turned into an addiction? And what would happen if I gave him my kidney? Will he be able to change? Will he appreciate this gift enough to start a new life? Or will my sacrifice be in vain, and the new kidney will repeat the fate of his own? Wednesday morning came too quickly. At 6 o'clock, I was already dressed and ready for the hospital. A neighbor, Doreen, offered to drive me and tried to comfort me all the way, although I could barely hear her words over the noise in my head. At the hospital, I was immediately taken to the pre-op ward. The nurse helped me change into a hospital gown, checked my vitals, and put in an IV. Dr. Wales will be with you shortly, she said, checking my name on the bracelet. I nodded, unable to speak. I still hadn't made my final decision. Part of me wanted to refuse, to save my kidney and my health, but the other part of me, the part that has always been a mother, could not accept the idea that my son would die because of my refusal. 20 minutes later, Lavinia appeared. She looked flawless, perfect makeup, hair in a neat bun, an elegant suit. She brought with her the smell of expensive perfume, which seemed out of place in a hospital room. "Are you ready?" she asked, looking at me with barely concealed impatience. "He's with my mother," Lavinia said. "I didn't want him here." It's too traumatic for the child. I felt a stab of disappointment. I wanted to see my grandson before the surgery, to hug him, to tell him I loved him. But maybe Lavinia was right. A hospital is no place for a little boy. And Garland? He's already being prepped for surgery, she answered, looking at her watch. Where's Dr. Wales? They should have started by now. Her impatience struck me as excessive, almost suspicious. Lavinia, I began quietly, I want to talk about Garland's condition. She froze, her eyes narrowed. What do you mean? I know about his addiction, I said bluntly. For a moment her face was completely still, like a mask. Then she smiled tightly. I don't know what you're talking about. Garland has kidney failure, and you're going to save his life. But the cause of his illness, the cause doesn't matter, she suddenly exclaimed, raising her voice. He's dying. He needs your kidney. You are his mother. It is your duty. I flinched at her tone, but before I could respond, the door opened and Dr. Wales entered the room with two nurses. "Good morning, Mrs. Thatcher," he greeted, checking my chart. "How are you feeling today?" "You'd better speed things up," Lavinia interjected before I could answer. "Garland is already being prepped, and I don't want him to wait under anesthesia any longer than necessary." Dr. Wales looked at her with professional courtesy, but I could see irritation in his eyes. "Mrs. Thatcher, we are following all protocols to ensure the safety of both patients, but you do realize how critical my husband's condition is, don't you?" she insisted. "Every minute counts." "Lavinia," I tried to reassure her, even though it was my life that was at stake in this operation. "Dr. Wales knows what he's doing." She backed away, but her face remained tense, her eyes following the doctor's every move with the eagerness of a predator. Dr. Wales checked my vitals, explained the procedure again, and made sure I signed all the necessary forms. "Mrs. Thatcher," he said quietly as the nurses prepared the equipment, "are you sure about your decision?" "It's not too late to change it." I saw Lavinia tense up, ready to intervene. I I started, but didn't know what to say. At that moment, the door to the ward opened sharply, and Ted appeared on the threshold, out of breath and with red eyes. "Grandma," he exclaimed, running to me. "You don't have to do this." "Ted," Lavinia grabbed his arm, trying to pull him away. "You're supposed to be with Grandma Ellen." "I ran away," he burst out. "I had to tell Grandma the truth." "What truth, Ted?" I asked, feeling my heart pounding in my chest. He looked at his mother with a determination that was unexpected for a 9-year-old boy. "Grandma, do I have to tell the truth about why he really needs your kidney?" Lavinia pulled him harder, her face twisted with anger. "Ted, shut up. You don't understand anything." "I understand everything," he shouted, pulling away from her grip. "I heard you and Dad fighting. I heard you telling him that it was his own fault for bringing himself to this state with his pills and drugs. I heard you say that Grandma didn't know anything and that she would agree to donate the kidney because she was his mother and it was her duty." The room fell dead silent. Dr. Wales and the nurses froze, struck by this unexpected outburst of emotion. Lavinia stood pale as a wall, her hand still holding Ted's, but without strength. "Ted," she whispered. "It's true, Grandma. The boy turned to me, his eyes full of tears. Dad destroyed his kidneys with drugs. He took these pills for years, and when he got sick, my mom said that you would give him your kidney because you are his mother. And he's not even going to quit. I heard him talking to someone on the phone yesterday when he thought no one was around. He said that he would soon return to normal life and that he would need to relax a bit after all this stress. Every word he said was like a blow. I looked at Lavinia, looking for an objection, an explanation, anything that could refute these terrible accusations. But she remained silent, her eyes darting around the room as if looking for a way out. Is it true? I finally asked her. She pressed her lips together, then relaxed them, trying to find the right words. You don't understand, Merritt, she finally said, her voice strangely calm. Garland is sick. Addiction is a disease. It's not his fault. It is his fault, Ted interrupted her. He knew what he was doing. He promised to quit 100 times, but he always went back to those pills. You said it yourself, Mom. You said he was weak and irresponsible. Lavinia slapped her son across the cheek, and the sound of the blow echoed through the room like a gunshot. Ted recoiled, clutching his face, his eyes wide with shock and pain. Lavinia, I exclaimed, trying to get up, but the IV tubes held me down. How dare you? Please leave, Dr. Wales said calmly but firmly, addressing Lavinia. Now. She stood, breathing heavily, her hand still raised. You don't understand, she repeated, but with desperation in her voice. This is our only chance. Without this kidney, Garland will die. And I can't raise Ted alone. I can't lose my house. We're so far in debt. Is that what this is about? I felt a coldness fill me. It's not just that, she answered quickly, but her eyes betrayed her. I love Garland. I want him to live. But yes, we have insurance in case he dies, and it won't cover death by overdose or suicide. But if he dies of natural causes, of kidney failure, you used me. I didn't recognize my own voice. It was so cold and hard. You lied to me to give a kidney to a man who wasn't even going to quit drugs. He promised me? Lavinia exclaimed, her voice now sounding desperate. He said that this operation would change everything, that he would give up, just like he promised me he'd quit when Ted was born, the boy asked quietly, and his words struck us all. Lavinia turned to her son, her face distorted. You're ruining everything, she whispered. Ted looked at her without fear, with a strange maturity in his eyes for a child. I was just telling the truth, Mom. I think you'd better step out, Mrs. Thatcher. Dr. Wales turned to Lavinia, and this time his voice left no room for denial. One of the nurses approached Lavinia and gently took her elbow. At first, it looked as if she would resist, but then she gave in, casting one last glance at me, a look full of anger, despair, and, most surprisingly, some strange relief, as if the weight of deception had finally been lifted from her shoulders. You're going to regret this, she said quietly. All of you. As the door closed behind her, Ted ran to me and hugged me, his small body shaking with sobs. I'm sorry, Grandma, he sobbed. I wanted to tell you before, but Mom, she said Dad would die if I told. I held him close, feeling tears streaming down my cheeks. You did the right thing. You did the right thing. Dr. Wales coughed, getting our attention. Mrs. Thatcher, in light of these circumstances, I think we need to postpone the surgery. I nodded, feeling a strange relief mixed with pain. I can't do it, Doctor, not now that I know the truth. He nodded in understanding. I'll talk to Mr. Thatcher. He needs help, but a different kind of help. Not a new kidney, but addiction treatment, and maybe psychological help for the whole family. I looked at Ted, who was leaning against me, his face still wet with tears. What's going to happen to Ted? I don't know, the doctor answered honestly. Let's get you off these tubes first and move you to a regular room. You need to rest. The nurses began to carefully remove the drip and other devices. Can I stay with you, Grandma? He asked quietly. I don't want to go back to Mom right now. I looked at Dr. Wales, who shrugged. Technically, he should be with his parents or legal guardian. But under the circumstances, I think we can make an exception for a few hours. Thank you, I whispered. When we were transferred to a regular room, Ted sat on the edge of my bed, still holding my hand. His face was serious, not childishly thoughtful. Grandma, I'm scared, he confessed. What's going to happen to Dad now? What will happen to us? I patted his head, not knowing how to answer. The truth was, I didn't know either. Garland could die without a new kidney, or he could go for treatment, try to save himself. Lavinia could have fallen into even more depression and despair, or perhaps finally realized that she couldn't continue to live a lie. And Ted? What will happen to this little boy who has shown more courage and honesty today than any of the adults around him? I don't know, kid, I answered honestly, but no matter what happens, I will always be there for you. I promise you that. He nodded, trusting me the way children always trust adults, even when we don't deserve it. We sat in silence, listening to the noise of the hospital outside the door. Somewhere there, Lavinia was probably trying to explain to Garland why the surgery was not going to happen. Somewhere else, doctors were discussing new treatment options for my son. Somewhere else, life went on, despite all our personal dramas, and I knew that we had a long, difficult road ahead of us. But today, in this hospital room, thanks to the courage of a little boy, the truth finally came out, and that was the first step toward healing, not just for Garland, but for all of us. Grandma? Ted suddenly asked, are you mad at Dad? I paused, trying to make sense of the maelstrom of emotions that had swept through me. No, dear, I'm not angry. I'm just sad. I miss the boy he was, the man he could have become, and I'm afraid for him, but I'm not angry. And with Mom? His voice became even quieter. This was a more difficult question. Was I angry with Lavinia for her manipulations, for being willing to risk my life for insurance? Yes, but I also understood her desperation, her fear of being alone with debts and a baby in her arms. I'm disappointed in what she did, I finally answered. But being angry doesn't solve anything, Teddy. Sometimes people do bad things when they're scared or desperate, like Dad with his pills. Yes, baby, like Daddy and his pills. Ted nodded thoughtfully and then suddenly looked up when he heard footsteps in the hallway. The door opened and Lavinia appeared on the threshold. Her eyes were red from crying, her makeup smeared, and her hair disheveled. She looked older, more tired, and something in her posture had changed. Her pride was gone, leaving only fatigue and defeat. Ted, she said quietly, we have to go. I want to stay with Grandma, he said firmly, clutching my hand, and I could feel his fear. Lavinia sighed but did not argue. We need to talk, she said, looking at me. I nodded, realizing that this conversation was unavoidable. Not now, Lavinia. I'm tired. And so are you. She sighed again and then nodded. Whatever you say. But you should know. The doctors say that without a transplant, Garland, her voice trembled. They're giving him a few months, maybe less. I felt my heart clench with pain. Despite everything, he was still my son. They offered him a rehabilitation program, Lavinia continued. If he agreed, if he proved himself clean for a certain period of time, they might put him on a kidney donor list. And he agreed? She shrugged, her eyes bitter. He said he'd think about it. He always does. Ted pulled me closer and I hugged him, feeling immensely tired. Go home, Lavinia. We'll talk later. She nodded but remained in place as if she wanted to add something. Finally, she looked me straight in the eye. I really thought it would save us all, Merritt. Not just Garland, but our family, our home, our future. I thought, I thought you'd want it because you're his mother. But not like this, Lavinia, I said quietly. Not in a lie, not at the cost of another life. She looked down, and I saw something new on her face. Shame. I know, she whispered. I know now.